What if the man trusted with children, the man parents turned to without question, was hiding the truth in his grave? In 1980, a quiet town gathered every Sunday beneath stained glass windows, believing their children were safe. They weren't. 11 altar boys vanished. Not at once, not loudly, but one by one. No bodies, no arrests, no answers, just silence. At the center of it all stood one man, a priest. Respected, protected, untouchable. For decades, rumors followed him to the grave, but proof never did. Until 26 years later, the FBI made a decision no one thought would ever happen. They exhumed his coffin. What they found would force a town to confront a truth it had buried for decades, and raise a terrifying question. How many secrets can a grave really hold? Tonight, we uncover a case buried for decades, until the FBI dug it back up. In 1980, this was the kind of town where nothing bad was supposed to happen. A place where doors stayed unlocked, where neighbors knew one another by name, where Sundays meant pressed clothes, polished shoes, and church bells echoing through quiet streets. Faith wasn't just part of life here, it was life. The church stood at the center of the town, both physically and spiritually. It was where families gathered, where milestones were celebrated, where grief was shared, and where trust was placed without hesitation. For generations, the same parish had served the community. And for many of those years, it was guided by one priest. He baptized their children. He buried their loved ones. He sat at kitchen tables and spoke words people believed came from God. To the families of this town, he wasn't just a clergyman, he was a constant. A figure of moral certainty in an uncertain world. Parents felt safe here. Safe enough to let their children walk to church alone. Safe enough to trust them in private lessons, late-night preparations, special trips. Safe enough to believe nothing bad could happen under the watch of a man wearing a collar. For the boys chosen to serve at the altar, it was an honor. They wore their robes proudly. They learned the rituals. They stood just steps away from the priest during Mass, believing they were part of something sacred. To be an altar boy in this town wasn't just a role, it was a privilege. No one questioned it. No one thought to. Because in 1980, in a town like this, faith meant trust. And trust, once given, was rarely taken back. No one imagined that the place meant to protect their children would become the last place some of them were ever seen. The role of altar boys. To understand how this could happen, you have to understand what it meant to be an altar boy. In 1980, serving at the altar was seen as a sign of trust and of character. Boys as young as 8 were chosen to assist during Mass. They rang the bells. They carried the candles. They stood beside the priest as he led the congregation in prayer. To parents, it looked like discipline, responsibility, a connection to faith. But serving Mass was only part of it. Altar boys were often invited to stay late after services, to help prepare the church, to learn prayers, to receive private instruction. These lessons weren't seen as unusual. They were encouraged. Because in this town, and in much of the world at the time, clergy were trusted without question. Priests weren't just authority figures. They were moral guardians. If a priest asked for extra time with a child, parents believed it was for guidance, for spiritual growth, for their child's benefit. Beyond the church walls, there were trips, weekend retreats, youth outings, occasional travel connected to church events. Opportunities meant to strengthen faith and build community. Each one required trust, and each one placed children further under the supervision of the same few adults. Over time, the access became routine. Private rooms within the church, unlocked offices, quiet hallways after everyone else had gone home. The priest knew the schedules. He knew which boys stayed late. He knew who wouldn't be questioned. And no one thought to ask why, because nothing about it looked dangerous. But in cases like this, danger rarely announces itself. It hides behind tradition, behind routine, behind trust. Access is where danger often begins. And in this town, access was absolute. The first boy vanished quietly. No sirens, no breaking news, no sense, at least at first, that anything was truly wrong. He was 12 years old enough to ride his bike alone, young enough to still be considered safe in a town like this. By all accounts, he was a good kid.